When I first heard about On the Resurrection by Gary Habermas, my jaw dropped to the floor, and it took me a minute or two until I had the wherewithal to pick it back up. Why? Habermas is bringing us the most comprehensive study ever on the historicity of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And what made my jaw drop to the floor was that this book, 1,000 pages on the evidences of the resurrection, this is the first of 4 volumes on the resurrection. We could be looking at 4 to 5,000 pages by the time it is all done, which is kind of exciting and kind of overwhelming. So overwhelming that it's going to take me more than one video just to review the first volume. As of now, I'm not sure how many videos I will make on this book, so let's start off with a brief overview of On the Resurrection. On the Resurrection Volume 1, Evidences, is split into 5 parts. Part 1 is on the nature of historical research. Part 2 is on Jesus himself, his existence, and the reliability of the testimony that he was a miracle worker. Part 3 is on the 5 minimal facts needed to accept the resurrection as a historical fact. Part 4 is on 6 other known historical facts. So if 5 weren't enough for you to believe, he's got 6 more waiting in the wings. And then part 5 covers the data on the resurrection in the Gospels. This video will review parts 1 and 2 on historical research and Jesus himself. And let me just say, to say that this book is good is probably the understatement of the century. But let me tell you about my thoughts on parts 1 and 2 of On the Resurrection. Welcome to Rev Reads. If you want to discover more books that will help you to see the strong foundation we have for our faith in the resurrection, please subscribe to the channel in order to stay up to date with the latest reviews. Also, please like and share this video with others you want to help them know about the work of Gary Habermas. Okay, just being honest, there are going to be a lot of people who probably aren't going to like part 1 at all. Although maybe everybody who's willing to get a book this thick on the subject of the resurrection, maybe they'll all love part 1. But if I'm honest, my eyes started to glaze over several times. I needed some extra cups of coffee, and I could not read this book in a room where my kids were doing other things because I really needed to concentrate in order to get through those first few chapters. The first part on the nature of historical research is important. I think it's probably right even that it is necessary for those who are serious about the historical evidences for the resurrection, but that doesn't make it fun or light reading. Habermas walks the reader through how we can know what we know about history with confidence. He sets the bar at confidence and not certainty, because when it comes to any event that took place 2,000 or 200 years ago, or maybe even 20 minutes ago, we're looking for confidence, not certainty. And this is an important place to set the bar when sharing the gospel. It's easy for people to dismiss the gospel because they believe that they can't know that the resurrection and work of Christ took place with certainty because they weren't there. Or there was no dash cam video showing the soldiers passing out when the stone was rolled away. So how can I know that Jesus rose from the dead? But if we set the standard at certainty, we need video camera proof, or we need to be an eyewitness ourselves. If that's the level of certainty that we're required to believe in any past event, we would need to confess that we don't know anything. According to Habermas, we are looking for historical events to be confirmed by painstaking research that can withstand the eye of critical scrutiny. And when it comes to the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus, Habermas will show that they stand up as well as, or even far, far better than the vast majority of historical events that people take for granted that all took place. If a person won't believe the death and resurrection of Jesus based on the evidences we have today, they shouldn't believe much of anything they read in a history book. He also takes a relatively brief but fascinating look at supernatural occurrences that were recorded in secular writings around the same time as the life of Jesus. And it was really cool to see those contrasted with the records we have of Jesus and his miracles and the resurrection. I gotta say, we are standing on solid ground with the resurrection, my friends. So the first section is not always fun to read, but it does what Habermas, I think, is going for, which is he's trying to drive us towards seeing how, if we accept the minimal facts of the resurrection, we should come to the conclusion that Jesus truly rose from the dead. Based on the minimal facts in this book, you should be confident that Jesus died on the cross and rose from the dead 3 days later. The second part on the historical Jesus and his role as healer was awesome. I can barely express the joy of being a believer in Jesus and then reading the overwhelming and at times almost comically overwhelming evidences for the historicity, not just of Jesus as a man who lived in the region of Galilee and then died in Jerusalem at the hands of the Romans, but also that Jesus was a miracle worker. To read all the non-Christian sources that refer to Jesus was pretty stunning, and we can build quite the full picture of Jesus from secular sources alone. Now, the Gospels, Acts, the writings of Paul, all of them are insanely early sources for confirming the historical data of Jesus Christ, and they are the best sources, obviously, but we can go outside of the New Testament in order to see that Jesus was a teacher, a healer, a Jew. He was killed by the Romans. None of his own disciples came forward for his defense at his trials. His tomb was empty. His followers then believed he rose from the dead, and those disciples who earlier wouldn't come forward, they were transformed in response to their faith as a result of the empty tomb. It's a rather stunning list of claims that all come not from the Bible. We have more proof for the existence of Jesus than Alexander the Great and Buddha, but no one would ever suggest that either of those men never existed. So really great work there. But then it gets even better, and that was the chapter on Jesus as healer. I gotta admit, I never would have guessed that so many unbelieving scholars and skeptics believe that Jesus was a healer and an exorcist. And by that, I just mean that they meant that Jesus cast out demons. I'm used to hearing that the world would reject the miracle stories of the gospel and only hold to the teachings of Jesus as genuine. But the reality is that when historians dig into the life of Jesus, they come away to the conclusion he was a healer. There's this quote from the book that I found to be very helpful. The sections in quotation mark on the screen are from Roman Catholic John Mayer. Being a healer and an exorcist has as much historical corroboration as almost any other statement regarding the historical Jesus. Critics who deny or ignore this feature of Jesus' ministry have produced a domesticated Jesus. And then we have Marcus Borg of the Jesus Seminar, who said, despite the difficulty which miracles pose for the modern mind, on historical grounds, it is virtually indisputable that Jesus was a healer and an exorcist. Habermas shows clearly that for those who have taken the time to dive into the details of all the evidences of the life of Jesus, they came away with the conclusion, based on all the standard practices of determining if an event is historical, which is why that first part of the book is important. If we can have confidence that this event or that event happened in history, we should be confident that Jesus both lived and worked miracles, both miracles with nature, such as turning water into wine and the feeding of the 5,000, as well as healing miracles. So what this book shows, I mean, you're starting off with a book like you think, and this is just on the resurrection, but it also teaches us that Jesus existed. He was really a person who lived 2,000 years ago. And not only that, Jesus was no showman, he was a miracle worker. So I found it a joy to read all the proofs that the Spirit left behind in history that point toward Jesus as the Christ who healed the sick and rose from the dead. On The Resurrection, Volume 1, Evidences, Gary Habermas has a strong start on his hands. But when your book is this long, let's admit it, it's more of a marathon than a sprint. And I'll be back with a future video with my thoughts on the minimal facts for the resurrection.